Hello and welcome. My name is Joe. I bought 5 acres of raw land in the high deserts of southern Arizona, and I'm building an off grid homestead. And this is my channel, Off Grid Solitude. I had a little jailbreak the other day. My rabbits escaped their pen. I built a small second pen for my rabbits. It was originally designed to house the males so I could keep them separate from the females and each other and regulate breeding a little bit. But last year, I bought another breeding pair of rabbits, so I put them in there to quarantine them. And they settled in, and I was never able to get them out again. The way this is designed, the top raises up, it's on a hinge, and I have to reach down to access the rabbits or give them their food or water or clean out the pen. Well, the rabbits really don't like me leaning over them like that, so they've never gotten comfortable with it. Whereas my other pen, where I can walk in and squat down and talk to the rabbits are a lot more comfortable with me. So that was a mistake I learned. I designed the pen this way because I wanted to keep the sun and rain off of them, but still keep the sides open so that I could get that cooling breeze. And out here, when it rains, it comes in sideways. So I thought short walls would be better. And that worked, but it meant I had to lean over. I went down 24 inches into the ground. The rabbits started digging immediately, which I wanted because that's how they stay cool in the hot summers. And it was good for a while, almost a year. But I noticed eventually some random rabbit showed up in that pen, which was a little surprising. I don't know where he came from. And some of the rabbits that are supposed to be in there showed up in the other pen. So obviously they tunneled together somehow. But they didn't escape. It was just an underground tunnel connecting the two cages. But eventually they dug under and out. And last week they all piled out on the same day and they were running around. I didn't think I would be able to catch them all. There's, I don't know, a dozen or more rabbits at that point of all different sizes. And when I did catch them, how was I going to keep them back in the cage? So I just left it as it was, and I figured maybe they would go back in at night for protection. But since catching the rabbits inside the pen was such a problem, I wasn't able to harvest them, and that's why I had so many of them. So I looked at this as kind of a blessing, take advantage of the situation. So I took 4 of them to process. And that takes a while to do, and it filled up my freezer. So that's all I was able to do that day. And by the next day, they scattered around. They run all over the place. I leave food and water out for them so they don't die of thirst or hunger. They pop up from time to time. It's been about a week now, and I still see them around. There's 2 of them that I haven't seen, and those were the 2 that hated me. They did not like me at all, would never let me get anywhere near them. So either they got taken by a predator or they were just hiding from me. They do seem to be finding food for themselves, though, which is good. I imagine predators will get a lot of them, and I'm about ready to harvest some more of them, so I'll have to chase them down and grab a few more. But I'm kind of leaving the situation as an experiment. One rabbit went back into the cage and lives there now. A few of them live under my RV. Some of them just run around. I'm interested to find out if they survive. We do have a local population of wild rabbits. It's a different species, though, the desert cottontail. So I don't know if domesticated rabbits can survive. I think the hot summers will be the real test. But I'm hoping to take care of the situation by then. As for harvesting and butchering the rabbits and preparing them to eat, I've learned a lot. And I've learned that not all the information available online is very good. I've decided to use a bullet to harvest the animal for a couple reasons. One, I don't actually have to catch the rabbit, I just have to get close to it. and it's quick and painless. A rabbit is pretty small, and sometimes I do miss. I just use another bullet. So it's only a second or two that the rabbit is in discomfort before I finish him. For some reason, most of the advice I read about skinning the rabbit said to do it when they're fresh. Now, I found that not to be true. For me, it's easiest when the rabbit is cold and stiff. When it's still fresh, it's just a floppy ball of jello and it's moving all around and you can't really get a hold on anything and everything is very stretchy. So I usually wait till they cool down before I skin them. Since a rabbit is such a small animal, I don't bother to hang it or set up any kind of hook. I just set it on the table or a cutting board and process it that way. That way I can flip it over or turn it or whatever makes easiest to process it. There's not much blood in a rabbit, so a quick sponge afterwards is all it takes. There's nothing to drain or anything like that. And since I'm not hanging it, it doesn't really matter if I start with the head or the tail. Sometimes one, sometimes the other. I usually remove the feet first, and I cut through the skin and all the tendons right above the joint. And that loosens the tension on that joint and usually makes it easier to separate. But if I can't separate it at the joint, rabbit bones are very small, very thin, so you can just crack the bone at that moment. At some point, I remove the head and the tail, start at one end and finish with the other. And the videos I see show them getting the skinning process started, carefully cutting around and peeling a little bit, and then the rest just peels off like a banana. But I have not found that to be true. The hide is attached very tightly to the animal, and if I pull too hard, it tears the animal apart. So I have to cut the whole way. But I found it's held most tightly right along that center, right along the belly button line. And that's also where it's thinnest. So you have to be the most careful around there, otherwise you can puncture the organs before you're ready. Once it's skinned and I remove the organs, I throw it in a stew pot. I used to soak it for an hour or two to get some of that blood out, but I don't bother anymore. I don't notice it makes much of a difference. I throw it in the stew pot whole. I get a pot big enough to fit the entire rabbit or 2 rabbits. Fill it up with water to cover. Add spices. Simmer for about 45 minutes. Leave the pot covered and let it cool naturally. Takes about an hour or two. And the meat is usually fall off the bone tender at that point. So I'll shred or dice up the meat and put it in a Ziploc bag and freeze it or refrigerate it ready for whatever recipe I want to put it in. I usually get about 2 pounds of meat per rabbit. I find the meat to be very tasty. A lot of people compare it to chicken, maybe even pork, but I find it tastes a little closer to turkey or duck. It's got a little bit of darkness to it. It depends on the recipe and the spices. But the biggest lesson I've learned is that it requires a very sharp knife. Hide is very thick. A dull knife is not going to cut it. So I always keep my knife sharp, but it has to be really sharp. So I use a whetstone. A handheld or a tabletop knife sharpener, or those metal steels you can use to quickly sharpen a knife. Just won't get it sharp enough. You need the whetstone. The knife has to be sharp enough to slice through paper. The quality of the knife isn't as important as the sharpness, so as long as the knife can hold an edge, and even the cheapest of knives can, then it's good enough for this purpose. I bought fairly small knives. I've tried to use larger knives, but that doesn't work on such a small animal. I will say, however, that one disadvantage to rabbits, I have to harvest and butcher one animal for 2 pounds of meat. So that's a lot of work. Now, if I had a larger animal, like when my goat gets a little bit bigger, and I harvest that, I might get 10 or 20 pounds of meat and only have to butcher once. So eventually I may transition to larger animals just to save myself some work. And that's just a quick update for the homestead. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing if you enjoyed this content, and I'll see you in the next video.